Okay, here are the accessories that I installed on my truck. I mean, they're all RC brand lighting. They have the roll bar lights here, and then they have the 2-inch pod lights for the back, reverse lights, and the light bar that goes into the front grille, and of course the Auxbeam controller that I'm using to control everything with. What I also purchased were the AEV rear bumper light brackets. Don't have a picture of those because those are in the truck, but you'll see those shortly. Okay, by using the Auxbeam control, I was able to eliminate some extra wiring and switches and relays. All of those became unnecessary since the Auxbeam control had all of that in a nice compact package. So inside the truck here, one of the first things I did was to install the Auxbeam controller and the keypad here, or the display pad. And this was done a little bit differently. I know Matt Ross, I'll leave a link to his video below. He was a reference for me for some of the lighting and everything that I've done. I made a couple other tweaks for myself, but anyway, I'll leave a link down below to his video as well. Okay, so one of the things I did a little bit different with my mounting is there was a little change pocket that was located here originally. Pretty useless other than holding a little bit of change. So what I decided to do was utilize that area, and I designed and 3D printed a piece to go here instead. The Auxbeam would bolt to that, and then of course the 3D printed part, which had a hole in it that allowed the cable to pass through it, and I ended up using that. And of course, all said and done, when I put it in there, put some goop adhesive on the inside to glue it inside the pocket to hold it in place, and that's worked really well. One of the other things that I did when I ran the wiring for this is the only thing I had to pull off was this cover here, and I used a trim pry tool to pop this off on either side. And once I got that off, on the right hand side here there was an opening that I could run the cable up through to the controller. So that would come up. There was plenty of room in behind it. I did have to drill a hole in the pocket, at the back of the pocket, to allow the cable to go to the back side of it. And then that's where the connection's made to the Auxbeam control cable. And then from there, it runs down the right hand side here, all the way back behind the console, and then out. And then out there. I drilled a hole there. There's other holes around, I think, too, but I drilled one right there and ran my cable for that through there. Now the other red cable that you see is coming from the controller itself, and I'm running that in and to the other side. I need to tie wrap that up, by the way. I haven't done that yet. And I run that to the other side, to the fuse panel on the other side, to a fuse location over there. Once I think of what that is, I'll pop it up on the screen here and let you know which location. And again, that's so that this Auxbeam display and controller will come on when you start the truck up, or when the ignition is on. Okay, now in the engine compartment, this is where I located the actual switch panel for the Auxbeam. I picked this location because right here in this area, it was wide open underneath. There wasn't anything there that it would be in the way of. I didn't put it didn't put it up here in this location because I didn't want it to interfere with access to the headlights, to the bulbs or any of that. So I actually had to make a bracket. It's just an L-shaped bracket that I made and just painted it satin black, and then bolted that, to the inside there with some self-tapping screws. That worked out really well. Good access to it. And all of the lights that I used were running to this controller. Just decided to utilize it. I didn't have anything set to come on automatically when I turned the lights on or anything like that. And as you can see, everything is, there's fuses already in place. So, and of course, if you wanted to change one of these fuses to a lower amperage fuse, you could do that. If you have something connected to it that you want a little bit better protection, you can do that. Now the wiring for all of this, I basically removed this cover here, and then once I did that, there was a channel right up underneath here where I could run all of that cabling down. It goes down through there, a couple of it goes through the firewall into the cabin, and then the other wiring runs down and goes up underneath the truck, and basically runs along the bottom side of the truck here, from front to the back. Now, as far as the wiring and everything goes for the Auxbeam itself, it's pretty straightforward. As I mentioned, I ran my power wire over to a fuse in the fuse panel inside the cabin of the truck, and then of course the ground cable I ran here to the battery. So once the Auxbeam switch panel has been put in and the display inside, then I started mounting the lights. Now in the front, as I mentioned, this is a Rough Country 30-inch curved bar, Black Series, just like Matt used in his video. Well, ultimately he had a different type and then decided to come back with this, and I did the same thing. I decided to go with that. That definitely does look better there. Now the brackets that I purchased to mount in here, you have to take the bumper and everything has to come off of the front to get access to mount those. I didn't do that. I wanted mine tucked back into the opening a little bit more, so I made brackets for myself. Of course, all of this has to come off the front here, this and all of this here, you have to take all of that off. The brackets there that I made, I'll try and show some pictures here of what I did. I'm sorry, but I don't have any drawings of this, I don't think. If I do, I'll make them available of what I did for that bracket. Now it was tight, you know, getting in there and getting this bolted in, but again, it was so I could tuck this back in there a little bit further. And the cable for it ran up inside here, up into here, behind here, and it comes up inside of here. Oops. And it comes up right there, and it runs through here and back up in there. Again, back up into this compartment in here. Now the next set of lights that I purchased were these Rough Country LED bars for my roll bar. I mounted those up there. Now I did have to make a modification for that. Okay, so I'm up on top of the truck now. Now this is a ZR2 bar that I purchased from you know, General Motors, of course, because I wanted a ZR2 bar, light bar, roll bar, and I wanted to use that because I like the looks of that, and of course that went with the truck. Now the location for the mounting holes for this varied a little bit from the original location. I used the existing hole that was here, and then I had to drill another hole here that was different than the original one that was there. So the spacing was a little different, and of course I had to do that to this side as well. And of course these holes here for running the cable. And the third brake light, if you look at Matt Ross's video on that, the cable for this light bar runs all the way up to the front to the engine compartment, and he shows you how to change the wire to the bottom of the fuse box in the engine compartment. And folks, when you look at that, it looks pretty intimidating, but it really is not. It's really quite simple to do that. It's really not hard at all. So don't let it intimidate you. Now, as far as the wiring harness connector that comes in this bar, these connectors were originally designed for the General Motors recommended light bars. But I will tell you, you take off one of the adapters on the end of their wire harness, and these will mount right to it. I didn't need to do anything different. I just mounted those, plugged them right into the connectors that came with this light bar. And these rough country lights work just fine, and they're very bright. These two and the front bar on the front, they're quite bright and work really well. Okay, now the last light modification that I did, again, these are rough country cube lights that I mounted in the back in this AEV bumper. Now the brackets, I did buy the brackets for these from AEV. They were about, I think, 65 bucks, you know, time you added everything. But I did buy those, but I had to modify those brackets and to get them to work with the rough country lights. If you use any of the lights that they recommend you use with those brackets, they are very pricey, and I did not want to spend that kind of money on those. These were 89 bucks for these, and they're very bright. They work perfectly well. But again, the brackets have to be modified a little bit to accommodate these so that they'll fit in there right. And I'll explain what I did with those. Okay, so to make the AEV brackets work out for the rough country lamps, some modifications are going to need to be made. Basically, this needs to be slotted out just a little bit. So I have this 1 inch from this side of the bracket. Now I'm looking at these. This is the driver's side, and this is the front of the truck that way. And this is the right side, passenger side, front of the truck that way. So this is the hole that you're going to slot and basically come 1 inch in from the back of the bracket to right here. And you can either, you know, re-drill it and radius it or just cut it straight. It really doesn't matter. And that gives you a little extra distance, a little more travel front to back. So that's what you're going to do to these brackets. Okay, so now the modifications that need to be made to the rough country lamp brackets are going to be this. Again, we're trying to give this a little bit of extra adjustment in the height. So what you're going to do is you're going to come in from the top, the bracket, down 3/4 inches to the bottom there, and you're going to slot these out, and you're going to do it on both sides. Again, that gives you some adjustment vertically for the lamps to help position them really well in the AEV bumper openings. Okay, brackets are done, slots are finished, ready to stick them in now. Okay, underneath the truck now, one of the things you're going to have to do before you mount the AEV brackets, you're going to have to remove this bolt here, and then there's a clip, threaded clip, that is going to be in this hole. And you're going to have to take a screwdriver, something, pry in there, and you're going to have to knock that clip out. A nut is provided with the bracket, and you're going to be using that instead. So this will, you use the existing bolt and then use the new nut provided for the bracket. And before you put that up in there, mount the light to the bracket and snug up the bolts, but don't have them real tight. And then up in here, I don't know if you can see it, the Allen screw, the hex screw on the side here, the socket head screw rather, I'll get it right in a minute. Snug that up, but allow it to be snug enough to hold position whenever you move it, because what you're going to do is you're going to put this up in here, you're going to snug this down, and then you can move this into position, and make sure that you're centered, in the opening. And then you're going to snug this screw up on at least on one side. If you can get to the other side, you can try that. If you can get to the other side, it's great, but snug up one side here so it'll hold its position. Then you're going to take it back out and then tighten up these two screws here really well, and then put it back in, and then push this up. This can still be a little bit loose, and then slide this or adjust it, so you'll be able to slide it forward or backward, and then side to side in the existing light bracket that you're going to mount to it. That is slotted. So once you do that, put that in there, center everything up, snug it all down, should be good to go. And I am running that cable up along underneath the back end of the truck and just tie wrapping it to the existing wiring. Back around to the driver's side, tie wrapping it here. This connector here I've got sitting up right there, kind of tucked it up in there. At some point in time, I'm going to have to make a splice. The cables to each of the light, Rough Country made them the exact same length. So one of them I'm going to probably have to make a splice further along. We'll see. Okay, so the last modification that I want to talk about is this ZR2 emblem. Now, normally when you buy the roll bar, this is just cut out, and I wanted to do something a little extra. What I wanted to do, instead of just putting this, acrylic pieces behind it, which as you can see, white and red, I wanted it to kind of go with, the white and red on the back of the truck. I wanted to take it a step further, and I wanted to illuminate it. I wanted it to light up in the night, and at night or in the day, but I wanted to also be able to control the brightness of it. Try to look really hard to find a video, and I only found one, and that was a Cruise 982001. I'll put a link to his video below also. He fabricated an enclosure and put behind it. He put blue acrylic on his letters to match his truck, and looked really good. And I took a little bit different approach with mine. I decided to 3D print the back enclosure for this. So I used white and red acrylic and I laser cut those. I have a CO2 laser that I cut them with. Of course, these can be cut with a jigsaw, and then just, the holes drilled with a regular drill. You don't need anything special to do that with. Now the 3D printer, I have a pretty large printer that I built that has a large print bed on it that I was able to print the box with. And as you can see it there on the back side, on the passenger side over there, it's pretty long. It fills up the bed pretty good. So unless you have a large 3D printer, you're going to have to make your box some other way. I'll leave a link to the files for anyone interested in trying to make one of these themselves. It's really not hard. Toughest thing was actually bringing myself to drill the holes into this brand new roll bar. So yeah, I had to work on that. So yeah, I had to talk myself into that, but I think it turned out really, really well. Okay, so to make the backlit ZR2 enclosure, you're going to need the following items. First thing, of course, is the 3D printed enclosure. You're going to need the laser cut white acrylic and red acrylic pieces. And as I mentioned, they do not have to be laser cut. You can cut these out with a jigsaw and of course use a drill for the holes. You're also going to need this piece of 1/4 inch clear acrylic that I will show you here shortly where that's going and why I'm using it. And of course you're going to need, these are M3 by 25 millimeter long button head cap screws. Now when you purchase these, they are black oxide coated typically. Well, they're going to rust. So what I did was push them in a piece of foam and use some satin black spray paint and put a couple of light coats on them and allow them to dry thoroughly before using them. And I'm also using the M3 nylon lock nuts. Now these came painted. They're not black oxide treated. They are actually painted. So I don't think you'll need to do anything with those. And you're going to need some, I'm using 18 gauge 2 conductor sheath cable here. I'm using a bigger size cable because I'm pulling this from the back of the truck all the way to the front. I just want something a little bit heavier duty. Didn't want to take a chance of, you know, breaking it along the way. So a little bit heavier cord there. And then, of course, to make it look nice, even though you won't be seeing the majority of it, is this PET sheathing that you can put around it. And of course, you can use this just for the areas of the cable that you see, if you want to do that. And then, you know, don't put it on any of the rest of it that's up underneath the truck and hidden away. And then you're also going to need a piece of foiled duct tape. This is the metallic aluminum foil duct tape, and that's going to be put inside the enclosure here to reflect light. You're also going to need the E6000 adhesive that I'm gluing all of this together with, the LED strip, of course. You are also going to need this controller. This controls the brightness of the LED, of course. For demonstration purposes, I'm using this this connector, this power connector. I'm going to wire this to the strip here, just to demonstrate the LED and this controller when it's all hooked up. But at the end of the day, you can make these connections how you want, but you're going to run this into the side of the box. You're going to run that wire through one of those holes in that end of the box. You can see them. You will use one of the holes on one side of the truck, and you want the wire coming out of the bottom hole, and then you'll use the other hole on the other side, and then the hole that you're not going to use, you want to plug that with the epoxy or some kind of sealant. You can use this same E6000 to plug that up. And you also want to seal around the cable as it enters the box. Seal around that really good too, so water can't get in there. You are also going to need a small razor blade like this, flat razor. And the reason why you're going to need that, because when you've glued the pieces of acrylic to the box, once it's all dried, you can come back with this along the edges and then shave off the amount of the glue, the excess glue that has squeezed out when you clamp these things together. That'll clean it all up so it doesn't look messy. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this piece of foil tape in here and trim the excess out. Okay, so now the foil is in the box. You basically just line up one edge, push it in all the way down, tuck it up into the corners, and then come back with a razor blade or something like this, or a utility knife, and trim out the excess and peel it out. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to solder the wires to the LED strip. Now this strip has been cut so that it will wrap the inside perimeter of the box and come all the way back around to where your connector is. So you want to cut this at the correct point here. So basically the LED strip is going to start right there like that. And of course, this one is going to be the driver's side box first. And that cord is going to be the shortest because you're just coming right out of the bottom here and you're going right into the light bar, the roll bar, up into that little pocket. So you don't want this to be over, a foot or two long, and then you can trim it more later. But anyway, so that's what you're going to do first is basically cut off a foot of this and then solder it to the LED strip. So here I've got the strip in. I pushed the cable through this particular hole because this is going to be on the driver's side coming from the back. So that wire is going to be on the bottom hole location. And that's tucked down. I've got the LED stripped, pushed down flush with the bottom all the way around, just like that. And I cut it, the very end of it, on the soldering tabs, and it works out to be pretty much perfect. This right here, by adding this foil in, I noticed without this, the LED wasn't nearly as bright. It made a big difference in reflecting light back to the back side of the acrylic. So it made a big difference. So that's worth taking the time to do. And then once that's in there, you're going to just put this 1/4 inch piece of acrylic in there just like that. Now what that's doing is that's helping to make sure that this strip is going to stay put. Once you put these the covers on, the acrylic colored covers on, over time this thing gets really hot outside during the summertime. I wasn't sure if this glue would hold, so I thought I would just put a piece of clear acrylic in just like that, and that would kind of hold it in place so it's not going to go anywhere. And as I mentioned, you're going to be gluing this hole here and here. You're going to seal around the wire where it's coming out with this E6000 or epoxy or something to seal that off, and then the hole you're not using, do the same. Okay, so the next thing you're going to do is we're going to peel the paper backing off of the acrylic pieces, and those are going to be put in place, and we're going to glue them. We're going to use this glue, and we're going to put a bead all the way around, and we're also going to put a bead in between here so that when these are joined together, you're also sealing that. Now you're not going to see this because that will be hidden by the metal in between the ZR and the number 2, there's a gap in between there, and this seam is going to fall right in that gap. So you're not going to see this seam here at all. And then what you're going to do after you glue it in place is you're going to use the screws and the nuts and go ahead and put them through and snug them up. And the glue is going to come out. Don't worry about it. That's one of the good things about this. When it dries, you can remove the glue. It's very flexible. So we're going to shave it off around the edges with this blade once it's dried. And then you can also peel any excess off of the side with your thumb. It'll kind of roll off in your fingers. So you can get it off completely. Okay, so once you have glued these in place, and of course we use the screws to hold all of them together, the screws and nuts. You could remove the screws and the nuts, take them off, and the next thing you're going to do is locate the holes in the roll bar. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to take the template that I provided for this box and print it out full size and trim out the inside line, cut that away. You're basically making a paper template, and you're going to put some painter's tape around the perimeter of the lettering, and you're going to use the template, and you're going to locate the holes with the template and drill through 4mm. And you're going to do that on both sides of the roll bar. Once you've located the holes, remove the painter's tape, and then you can, from the back side, put this on, run the screws through the front side, and then bolt it up to the back side of the roll bar plate and snug it up. Now this is 3D printed, ASA, as I've mentioned before, and it will curve with the plate. The roll bar plate has a slight curve to it, and this will flex to that. And just draw it up snug, and there you have it. Okay, so I turned the light on, and this is controlled from my Auxbeam controller. And it's weird, but the red doesn't look the same on my phone as it does in real life. That actually looks very red. Let me see what the other side looks like. Okay, it looks the same over here, but that actually looks very red. Now the brightness for the ZR2 lighting is controlled from this right here. Basically you just set it to where you want it to be and just forget it. I've got it out here just so I can show it to you, but normally it's tucked up inside of here, out of the way where you don't see it. But as I can tell, I'm going to adjust it. I don't know if you can see it or not. I'll try and zoom in a little bit here. So there you go. You can control the brightness that you want. Very strange, when I zoom in on the 2, it looks more red than when I zoom out. That's strange. So the wiring is running from the passenger side one over this way, and then up, and then spliced together here, up inside of here, out of the weather, keep it dry. And then the wiring is then dropping down through the bed here, coming out the bottom, down underneath toward the front. So there you have it. Those are the modifications that I've made so far to this truck. Down the road, maybe some rims and tires. but and maybe even replace the headlights in the truck, tail lights, but maybe even the fog lights. I don't know. That's another project for another day. Thanks for watching. Take care.